welcome back. We are going to talk about it's the end of the first quarter, right? We're coming up on the end of March. We got January, February, March. You'll see on my screen that I'm sharing, it talks about the 12-week year. So either way, whether you're following a 12-week year, if you're following a 12-week year, you would do this review and planning at the end of your 12 weeks. If you are not doing a 12-week year and you set up just kind of an annual goal, like a traditional annual goal, then you would really want to go back and do this review on a quarterly basis. So this applies no matter what, even though my presentation slides that you'll see mention the 12-week year, it works either way. These are things that you should be doing and reviewing and planning. Now, what if you're watching this or you're on our training today and you're like, oh my gosh, I never put into effect any goals or plans or processes for 2025. Okay, that's okay. You're a little behind, but that's all right. You can pick up now. It's never too late to start the process. I would recommend that if you don't have goals and milestones in place for 2025, that you still do the review because it's still going to help you move forward. It's going to know where you're missing, what you need to do to move forward. I would also recommend that you go back to our YouTube channel or to the training file and find the business planning sessions and go back and watch them. This year I did business planning in 4 sessions. I think Ed's done a couple in the office as well. So you have a couple of options there as far as getting caught up on putting together some goals and a business plan for 2025. Again, it's never too late. When we look at our real estate calendar, know that everything happens kind of on a 60-day cycle. And what that means is what we do today is going to show results in about 60 days. Okay. Nothing that we do in real estate happens immediately. So, right. So if we are doing lead gen now, oftentimes that's not going to result in putting a transaction into contract for a couple of weeks at least, if not a month or more. And then once we put something in contract, it's probably going to take us 21 to 30 days to close it. Right. So that's why we need to be consistent in our activities throughout the year. And why, when we look at our year, so as you're setting up and planning your year or reviewing your plan for 2025 or your plan for the next 12 weeks, keep in mind that if you're looking at it on an annual basis, so we've set up our goals for the year and we're saying, hey, we want to close 24 transactions by the end of 2025. Know that we really have until the end of November, maybe mid-October, to put things into contract. Okay. So anytime we talk about business planning or setting ourselves up for success, looking forward, we know in real estate specifically, it really follows most any business, but real estate specifically, that we want to have our business plan in place by the end of October. Okay. By the beginning of November, we want to start executing our plan for the next year. Now, this is different if you're running on a 12-week year where we're only looking at 12 weeks at a time. So depending on how you've chunked up your year, how you're looking at your goals and your plans, it may be different. But no matter what, at the end of each 12 weeks for the 12-week year or at the end of the quarter, we need to set time to review. Okay. Hold on, let me get on the right screen. All right. So as part of this review, trying to make my mouse work, we want to see if I can get it to move forward. Do a few things. The first thing that you want to do in your review block is you want to review how you did with relation to your goals. Okay, how close did you come to hitting your goals for this quarter? For this 12 weeks, right? Did you meet or exceed the goal? Okay, and I would give yourself a score. So if my goal was to close 3 transactions this quarter and I closed 1, you would take 1 transaction, okay, and you would divide it by 3, and that gives you 0.33. We're going to move that decimal point over 2 spots. That gives us 33%. So you scored a 33%. If you close 2 out of 3 transactions, then that would be, you know, like 67%. And if you closed all three, then that's 100. Now, if you have something in contract right now, that doesn't count. It didn't close during the first quarter unless you're planning to close it this week. Okay. So that's how that would work, or within your 12-week period. So if you're doing 12-week goals, you may not be at the end of your 12-week period, depending on when you started. But you want to give yourself a score of how you did to your goal versus what you actually did. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions about that? Okay. Now, I personally would recommend, on my example, I said transactions. I would recommend that you don't have a transaction goal, that your goal should be a GCI goal, or a gross commission income. What did you actually make from each transaction? That should be what your goal is based on, because, you know, if your goal was 3 transactions and you closed 3 lots at $30,000, your income is probably maybe $6,000 total for all 3 transactions, and that may not allow you to reach your goals financially. Versus if I had a goal of, hey, I needed to close $30,000 worth of income over the first quarter of the year, or my 12-week period, and I ended up with a $1.5 million deal and then a small one, even though it may have, based on averages, right? My average transaction size, I may have needed 3 or 4 transactions to get to that GCI, which is that gross commission income, right? I may have met that with 2 transactions. Okay. I may have still been able to meet my goal. So I recommend making it more of a monetary goal than a transaction goal, only because when we look back at what your vision is for your life and where you're trying to get, ultimately the number of transactions that you close don't get you to where you want to be. Now, the only difference for that is, let's say you're trying to gain a referral network or something that requires a certain number of closed transactions, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of, but they are out there. Or you're trying to, there's other things that may be transactionally based. That's the only time that I would see it based on transactions, but I would still make it the primary goal should be gross commission income versus your actual number of transactions. That would be a secondary goal. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Okay. That being said, you, as part of, we're coming up on the end of the quarter, we're going to do review and planning. The first thing that we want to do is, what was our goal and how did we do against that goal? Now, that means that you need to be tracking your actions and know where you're at all times. Okay. So this rolls into several other things. Number one, we should be tracking our finances. So you should be using QuickBooks or something similar to that, that allows you to track your business expenses, your business income, all of that, so that you know where you're at financially. Number two, we should be tracking our actions and our both leading and lag indicators, and we should be tracking the results of those. So if you need a copy of this spreadsheet, hold on, I'm going to copy the link for you. I'm going to throw it in the chat box, if it'll come up. Da, 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 da. You should be tracking all your actions. Okay. This form allows you to track like your values. It's got some other bonus items in there. It's going to allow you to track, anyone with a link can view it. We're going to copy that link. Okay. Done. I'm going to throw it over in the chat box. All right, there you go. So you have access to that. To use this tracking form, what you want to do is you want to open it. It's going to open up. It's a Google Sheet document, so it's going to open up in your Google Drive. You want to save a copy of it to your own Google Drive. So you're going to save yourself a copy, because this one's only going to allow you to view it. Once you save a copy to your Google Drive, you should then have access to go in there and edit it. That's what keeps you from editing my template version of it. All right, so on this, this second tab here is your lead generation tracking. Okay, you should be tracking this each and every week. Okay, this doesn't mean that these are your lead gen options. These are just some examples. Your database and sphere of influence should be on there all the time, leads from listings, and then you may have some other lead generation options as well on there. So just kind of keep that in mind here. Let's see if I can. Right. So I've got just some examples like open houses, social media farm. That way you guys can see the types of things that you may want to track depending on your types of lead generating activities. Database, like how many calls are you making to your database? How many conversations are you having? How many text messages are you sending? How many replies are you getting from those text messages? How many social media interactions are you doing? How many replies? Are you dropping off pop buys? Are you receiving referrals? Did you set any appointments, right? We're going to track those activities, and there might be other things that you want to add in there. You've got leads from listings, number of active listings that you had, right? If you have 0 active listings, then of course you're not going to have any sign calls. So we want to track that on a weekly basis. But if we have an active listing, then how many sign calls did you get? How many mailers did you send out? How many open houses did you host on your listings, right? So we want to be tracking these actions so that when we go back to review and we're at 33% of our goal, we can go back and review those actions. Okay. So just know that you now have access to that spreadsheet. It's also going to track against your goal. So the first tab is your goal tracking. Keep in mind that you're only supposed to update like the yellow columns on this. The rest will auto calculate for you, or should auto calculate for you. If there's a problem with it, you need help with the calculations, let me know. The formulas, that's what I was looking for. But right, so this is if we plug in our form over our goals over here on the economic model tab, it's going to automatically fill in the number of transactions and like your GCI goal. And then you would put in here, how many appointments did you have last week, right? You'd put that in. How many agreements did you have signed? How many closings did you have, right? Those are all going to be numbers. What was your GCI? That's your gross commission income. So your gross commission income, just to clarify, that's before any fees or anything are paid out. Before you pay your transaction coordinator, before you pay the office, the transaction fee, that's your gross commission income, the total commission. Okay. It also gives you a point on here that you can review how the week went. So what were your commitments from last week? What were the results of those commitments? What has happened since last week, right? So that gets into the heart of why maybe we did or didn't, like what worked well, what didn't. What business challenges are you facing? What personal challenges are you facing? And then what should you focus on to move forward? And how will you know that you've succeeded in moving forward? What does success look like? It also has a database tracker for your pipeline, how many active listings, how many pending, and what month they went pending, and then who do you have currently looking or listing agreements signed with, right? So that pipeline. So it allows you to track all of that information. If you guys want me to do a more in-depth training on this spreadsheet, let me know. I'm happy to do that because I can walk you through like what the Dream Life form, that tab looks like. Okay. I can go into the economic model and how to fill that out. Okay. Adriana says, yes, please. So we will schedule a training on this. Maybe at the beginning of, well, maybe even at the beginning of April. We will do it at the beginning of April so that if you guys don't have a business plan in place, this will help you figure that out. Okay. So we'll walk through what that is, but know that you should be tracking your lead generation activities and you should be tracking all the time on a weekly basis where you're at in relation to your goals. All right. All right. So first step in review is where are you in relation to your goals? Okay. This video will be posted, absolutely. And all the trainings are posted, Shauna, so you're good no matter what. Okay. Now, it's also a good idea. Sorry. All right. It's also a good idea to make sure that, let's go back to our slideshow presentation, that you are looking at your weekly execution score. And what is that? Okay, well, whether you're doing a 12-week year or whether you're looking at your year on an annual basis, each week, you should sit down and say, okay, what's my goal that I'm working towards? And what are the steps I'm going to take this week to move towards that's that goal, right? So if my goal for the year or for this quarter is to close $30,000 in gross commission income, what am I doing this week to move myself towards that goal? Right? So I should be on a weekly basis putting together my action steps that's going to move me towards that. And it might be sending out postcards, it might be making calls to my database, right? Whatever those top priorities are. It may be putting systems and processes in place to open houses and hosting 3 open houses, right? So whatever that is on a weekly basis, we want to sit down and put that together. And then we want to look at how we did on a weekly basis. So this is a good practice, not just waiting till the end of the quarters. How did we do to the completion of our goal? But we should be reviewing it on a weekly basis. So we'll talk about that moving forward when we dive into kind of that whole spreadsheet. Okay, but it's the same idea here. If you were looking at and have your actions for the last 12 weeks or the last quarter, then what you'd want to do is add up your score. You would give yourself a score. So if my goal this week or my action step this week was to make 25 phone calls and I made 20 phone calls, then this week at the end of each week, I'd also be doing the same review and saying, hey, my goal was 25, I made 20. I don't know what the math on that is. We're going to go 25 divided by 20. That's, whoops, 20 divided by 25. Sorry, I did that backwards. That's 80%. So this week I got an 80% score. So if you were doing that on a weekly basis for your execution, then what you'd want to do is at the end of the quarter or the end of your 12 weeks, we would want to take and average out those execution scores. So if this week I got an 80%, next week I got a 70, the week after that I got 100, I would add all of those together and divide it by the number of weeks. So in that example, it would be divided by 3 because I gave you 3 weeks worth of weekly execution scores. Okay, I hope this is making sense, everybody, because then that tells us that, well, if we're only at 33% of our goal and our weekly execution score ended up only being 50%, well, oh my gosh, that makes it so easy to know where we're missing the mark in order to reach our goal. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? So if we look at our weekly execution score, then we can look back and kind of know where we got, kind of what worked, right? What didn't work, and what changes need to be made in order to move forward. Okay, if we're at 100% execution score, right? We know that we put things in place, we executed it each and every week, and we still are at 33% of our goal. We only closed a fraction of what we were wanting to close. Then we know that we need to look at what we're doing execution-wise and how it's moving us forward towards our goal. Because if we're doing everything and we're not hitting our goal, we need to change the process. We either are focusing on the wrong thing and we need to change and focus on something different. We may need to change the conversations that we're having, so the scripts and dialogues that we're practicing and using during our phone calls or our open house or whatever. It may be that, oh my gosh, like I wanted to have 3 closings this year, or this quarter. I only closed 1. I did host open houses. I got 100% on my execution score. I hosted an open house every week that I was supposed to host it. I executed my plan for the open houses. I door knocked. I passed out flyers. I invited people on social media. Amy, I was like the open house queen. And then I'm going to say, okay, so when you get to the open houses, how many people are showing up? And you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, Amy, they're always great. I have 10 to 12 parties passing through every open house. It's fabulous. Okay, so then what kind of conversations are you having during the open houses? Well, I'm not. I'm letting them pass through the open house. They're signing in, and then I'm calling to follow up with them afterwards. I don't want to bother them, after, right? Whatever it might be. So it might be, okay, well, we need to talk about then our dialogues or our scripts that we're using during the open house. We need to have conversations with people. We need to work to set appointments. We need to ask them how they're seeing properties. We're going to dig in to see whether they've actually got an agent or not, right? What does that mean? So what changes need to be made to move forward? Now, if we're at 33% of our goal at the end of the quarter or the end of the 12-week period, And our execution score, or we look back on what we did on a weekly basis, and you're like, oh, well, that week got sidetracked because I didn't have childcare. And that week I got distracted and didn't focus in. And I was supposed to make phone calls, but I only called like 2 people. Oh, yeah, that week I got really nervous to make phone calls. So instead of phone calls, I sent text messages. I didn't actually host any open houses. Then we're going to be like, okay, well, our problem is our actions, not tweaking the actual process of those actions. Like we need to execute the actions. If we need to make phone calls or we need to host open houses, like we need to actually get on that and do that. Do you see how our execution on a weekly basis, like tracking our activities of what we're actually doing, feeds into figuring out how to move forward at the end of a quarter or the end of a 12-week period? Does everybody see that? Okay. All right. So we're going to review how we did to the goal. We're going to look back over our tracking and see how we did on a weekly basis, whether we actually executed our plan or not. If we didn't have a plan, that's probably first step is we need to have a weekly plan devised at the beginning of each week. And then we want to draw insights for that. What worked, what didn't work, and what changes do you need to make to move forward? Okay, we're not going to dwell on the past. We're not going to sit and panic that we didn't reach our goal. We're just going to say, hey, what do I need to change in order to move forward to hit my goals this next quarter? Okay, any questions so far? Okay, I would recommend that as we're doing this, that we don't just review our business, that we take time to review all areas of our lives. Okay, you want to review spiritually, how are you doing? Key relationships, your spouse, your family, your business, personal and physical, right? What areas are you pleased with? And what areas would you like to improve over this next quarter? Because this is going to help give us our game plan to move forward. So I would say don't just keep goal planning or life planning, business planning to business. We want to plan out our whole life. We want to improve not just our business, but we want to improve our relationship with our spouse or how much time we're spending with family, because we don't ever want it to get totally out of whack, right? If we're only putting a plan in place for our business and we're only reviewing how we're doing in relation to our business plan, and we're not looking at how that's affecting our family or how that's affecting our time with our friends or how that's affecting us physically, right? Are we taking care of ourselves? Then there might be areas that you're like, oh my gosh, like I hit all my goals for my business this quarter, but man, I didn't take care of myself at all. Like I slept maybe 3 hours a night. I've gained weight. I'm not focused what I'm eating because I'm so busy. I'm like grabbing food on the go and eating fast food all the time, right? So it might be, oh my gosh, like physically, like business is great and I'm doing really good and I'm hitting my goals, but physically, it's lacking. Like there's something out of whack there. So this quarter, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing business wise, but I'm going to put some primary focus in on the physical aspect of my life, on getting my health back in order, right? So it's okay to do that. So we want to look at your key areas, evaluate how you're doing on each of those areas, and you may want to give yourself a score of like 1 to 10, like spiritually, how am I doing? And that might look different for everybody, right? Spiritually, how am I doing? Like 1 being like poor and 10 being like, I'm on point. Like it's exactly where I want it to be. And just give yourself a score on each and every area. And remember too, that when, like, let's say they're all 3s. Let's say, man, everything is a 3, or maybe business is a 9 and everything else is a 3. That doesn't mean that we stop focusing on business and we focus on the other 5 areas. Less is more. So we don't want to tackle too much in a quarter. We want to look at it and say, okay, what's the one thing over the next quarter or the next 12-week period that I want to see come back into balance? Where do I want to focus in on? Okay, what's the most important one? And then let's help bring the level of that up in line with where we're at with our business, or maybe it's the business needs to come up too, right? So we might pick just like 1, maybe 2 that we're going to focus on. Okay. If we try to do all 6, you're going to get overwhelmed and you're going to end up doing what a lot of people do, which is I'm going to improve in all these areas all at the same time. And then you go into like action paralysis because you're just overwhelmed and you're not going to do anything. Okay. Oh, there it goes. My keyboard is working. Okay. Next, what you want to do is you're going to take time to review and score yourself on the disciplines of success. If you have followed me on the 12-week year or rewatched that training or following that training, this is going to make a lot of sense. If not, these are things that you should be paying attention to no matter what as part of your business planning. So on a scale of 1 to 10, we don't have a business plan without like a vision or a long-term goal. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how did you do with creating vision and staying connected to it? Or how did you do with creating your long-term goal and staying connected to that? Are you keeping it in the forefront of your mind all the time? Did you create that vision? Or, is it on your desktop? Are you focused in on it? Are you revisiting it? Are you making sure your activities on a regular basis are tied into that vision? Okay. You're going to give yourself a score of how did you do with creating and implementing your plan for the last 12 weeks, okay, or the last quarter. How did you do with creating and implementing a plan? If you're like, Amy, I had no plan for the last quarter, then you would be at a 0 or a 1, right? And if you're like, I had a plan and I kind of stuck to it, like I implemented some of the stuff, I got overwhelmed a little bit, that paralysis thing that you just talked about, that like resonated with me because I just had too much on my plate and I just ended up doing nothing. And so maybe I'd give myself like a 2 or a 3, right? Or maybe you're like, man, I did all the things. I may not have hit my goal, but I like worked all the things that I'm supposed to be doing. And I would say I got myself like an 8. Like I stayed connected to that weekly plan. I created one. I stayed tied to it. Okay. Let's see here. How did you do with your performance time, right? How did you do with putting things on your calendar? Okay. Did you put things on your calendar? Did you put everything on your calendar? Did you stick to everything that was on your calendars, or some stuff that you just decided to ignore and not do? Did I have scheduled for an open house this weekend and I just decided that I didn't want to do one, so I just ignored it and move on, right? How did you do with putting things on your calendar and sticking to it? And that means that everything goes on your calendar, your personal activities, your business activities. If you have a family that you're responsible for, those activities need to go on there as well. Did you include some self-care time, right? How did you do? So we want to give yourself a score for that. How did you do with tracking your key measures? Did you use some sort of tracking spreadsheet? Like I introduced you at the beginning of this lesson. Did you do a good job at weekly, no matter how you did, how successful or unsuccessful you were on the week? Did you put your numbers in there? Okay, so give yourself a score on that as well. Okay, then you're going to look back and review this and think about, okay, well, what disciplines am I going to commit to leveraging more effectively over the next 12 weeks or the next quarter? Okay, if you don't have a vision, you may want to start there. Okay, if you don't have a vision or a long-term goal of what you're working towards, that's where I would recommend starting. Spend some time there. It may be that you're like, man, Amy, over the next quarter or the next 12 weeks, my focus is just going to be on going back to the basics and setting up my business plan. I'm still going to like work the things and call the people and do some of the stuff that I need to be doing to keep my business going. But I really need to go back to basics and get set up with what my long-term vision is. What am I working towards? When it's hard to get out of bed in the morning, what am I focused on that's going to make my feet hit the floor and get going? When I've heard the 5th no this week during an open house because everybody thinks they have an agent representing them, or they've all lied to me about having an agent representing them, what's going to keep me to keep on going and ask the 6th person? Okay, so we may want to start there. If we don't have a plan in place for the next quarter or the next 12 weeks, that might be where you need to go. If you're like, man, I have a vision. I know where I want to go. I know like long term, like 3 years from now, where I want to be. But man, I didn't like tie a plan to it for the next quarter, then that might be where you need to go. If you have those 2 things in place, then it may be like, okay, well, now I need a weekly routine. I need some sort of like weekly plan to implement and put in place that's going to help move me closer to that process. Right? So do you see how this works? Like we may need to go up to the top and start there and work our way back down. But giving yourself a score on how this is, or if you even had this stuff in place, it's going to help show you where you need the most improvement. Any questions? Okay. The next thing that you want to do is you want to take time to review your breakthroughs. Okay. What were significant accomplishments that you had over the last quarter or the last 12 weeks? What did you do well? Did you get to a closing and you've never had a closing before? Yeah, your goal was 3, but man, let's celebrate the 1, right? What maybe you're like, man, I thought open houses were the scariest thing ever. I was reluctant to do it. And this last 12 weeks, I hosted an open house and it was actually fun. And I met some people that want to do business with me in the future. Right? So what were those accomplishments? It could be too, remember, we're not just looking at business. It could be like personal. It could be that, hey, I took advice and I quit working Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 3 p.m. so I could be home with my kids in the afternoon when they got home from school. And that worked well for me. And that's an accomplishment because that was hard for me to put my family first. Right? So it doesn't have to be all business accomplishments. You can focus on personal accomplishments at all. Maybe it's like, man, my husband and I, we scheduled a date night every week this last quarter, or we hit at least 10 out of, like, my goal was 12. We hit 10 out of 12 date nights and our relationship is doing better. That might be your significant accomplishment. Okay. And it doesn't necessarily have to be goal related. You could say, hey, my goal this quarter was like database, leads from listings, and like working on open houses. But every time I walked into a store, I had conversations with people. And those conversations led to relationships and people added to my database. So my significant accomplishment over this last quarter, the last 12 weeks, was I found I'm really good at having conversations in stores with random people. Right? Because maybe now we need to tweak our plan and incorporate that in as part of our lead gen. Okay. So significant accomplishments. What thinking do you need to change to double your results in the next 12 weeks or the next quarter? If you closed 1 this quarter, what do I need to change mentally in my mindset to allow myself to close 2 next quarter? If I close 3, what would allow me to get to 6? What do I need to change? If I say, oh my gosh, my goal was 3, I closed 3 and closed 6. Oh, there's no way I could do 6. Okay, well, there's your mindset you need to change. There is absolutely a way that you can do 6. What do you need to change? I need to change the fact that I'm telling myself I can't do it. And I need to figure out, okay, well, gosh, I felt overwhelmed and super busy. So in order to close 6 this next quarter, what I need to change in my business in order to allow me to do that? Do I need to have some part-time help? Do I need to talk to some of the newer agents in the office and maybe ask some people to do some showings for me? Like, I'd happily pay somebody to go show some properties to my clients to free up my time so that I can close 6, right? So what does that look like? What do we need to change in our thinking in order to double those results? Okay. And then what new actions do you need to take in the next 12 weeks in order to achieve breakthrough? So we want to make sure that we review kind of where we're at, give ourselves those scores. Then we want to review those breakthroughs. Significant accomplishments. What do we need to change? What thinking in our minds would need to change in order to double those results? And what actions would we need to take in order to achieve that breakthrough or double those results? Okay. So once you've spent time reviewing the past quarter or the past 12 weeks, you're going to spend some time envisioning what life looks like at the end of the next quarter, okay, or the end of the next 12 weeks. So you want to make sure to take time to imagine, just sit back and visualize. You may decide to journal it out, right? Take time to imagine what business looks like in another 12 weeks or another quarter. Are you growing in your effectiveness of executing your tactics, right? Is your business growing? Are you gaining confidence? If you have a celebration planned or if I hit my goal, this is what it gives me, right? What does that look like? You might be like, man, if I hit my goal for the next quarter, where I want to be, I wouldn't have any more debt. right? So what does that look like? I'm no longer having to write checks to all these student loans and credit cards and different things, right? And man, I would have an extra, $700 at the end of the month. And so for that first month, man, when I pay off all my debt in the next quarter, um, I'm going to take that $700 and I'm going to go and have just a fun overnight experience somewhere. I'm going to fly somewhere that I've always wanted to go and stay in a hotel and just enjoy a weekend of celebration, right? With that money that I would have been paying to my debtors, right? So whatever that is for you, like what does it look like? What does your personal time look like in 12 weeks, right? So take time to vision where you want to be at the end of next quarter. So we've got June, July, and August. So this brings us to the end of summer. If you're doing it by quarterly, or 12 weeks puts you about the same time plan, depending on where your 12 weeks starts and ends, right? So what does that look like? Take some time to visualize it. I would recommend journaling it. I would recommend taking out a pen and paper and writing down what that looks like. All right. So now that you've taken time to know where you want to be at the end of the next quarter, the end of the next 12 weeks, you've reviewed your goals, you've reviewed your tactics or your action steps to get there. You've reviewed what worked and didn't work. You've given yourself a score on how well you executed your plan for this last quarter. You've put some thought into all the areas of your life and you've made decisions on where you want to see improvement. You've thought about what actions you need to take over the next 12 weeks to achieve breakthrough. Then what you're going to do is you're going to actually put together your plan for the next quarter or the next 12-week period. Okay. So in a nutshell, what we're going to do is we're going to this process starts over every single quarter. So you're going to go back and I want you to define your new top 2 to 3 goals that are going to move you closer to your vision over the next quarter or the next 12 weeks. Okay. So, and this doesn't mean, just so you know, if you're like, man, my goal this last 12 weeks was to close $30,000 in gross commission income, and I only hit 10,000. That doesn't mean we're like, well, to hit our goal by the end of the year, it was 30,000 per quarter or 120,000. So this next quarter was 30,000, but now I'm behind by 50,000. So I'm going to chunk on that 20,000. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what it's going to be. Okay. We're not trying to like make it all up in the next quarter because then you're going to feel like you're always clawing to get out. We want to review and plan like, okay, so $10,000 this last quarter. Where do I need to be? Well, gosh, I really want to be like, this means that this might tweak where I end up at the end of this year. It might tweak it a little bit, but this next quarter, I really want to focus in on just hitting that 30,000. I'm not going to chunk the missing 20 into that. I just want to go in for that 30,000. Okay. So you might do that. It might be that I want to go to the gym. Like one of my top goals might be I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week. Okay. It could be my top goal is Amy keeps talking about database. I swear every call I'm on with her, every training, she's always like, it's about your database. I'm going to actually like put my database together. Like my goal for the next quarter or the next 12 weeks is to have all my contacts in my database and all of the contacts in that database on some sort of contact plan, right? That could be your goal. And that's going to help you achieve your goals ultimately by the end of the year, right? So whatever that is, we're going to pick our top 2 to 3 new goals. Okay. We're going to put those in place. And then what we want to do is you're going to identify the top tactics to achieve those goals. Like what things need to be. So if I'm like, I need to have everybody in my database and I want to have them all on a smart plan or some sort of contact plan by the end of the quarter, then I'm going to say, well, I need to go through my phone. I need to go through social media. I need to go through all those pieces of paper on my desk from those open houses or all those lead gen forms that I had. I need to go through all those and put them in my database. So I'm going to write, put phone contacts in database, put social media contacts in database, right? Here's my tactics to achieve that step. Like, what are the things that need to happen? It may be that, like, gosh, Amy talks about these contact plans, and most people should be on one of two, either that 19 to connect, right? Or that 36 to convert. And she's talked about kind of what those look like. So I need to define what that looks like for me and what those touches or interactions look like for the people in my database, or I need to start developing a newsletter. Or, gosh, newsletter creation isn't my forte, so I'm going to find somebody that can supply me with a newsletter to email out on a monthly basis. Right? So put together those tactics that you need to achieve in order to reach that goal. Okay, that's going to set you up for success to drive the weekly action steps that you need to do. Is this making sense to everybody? Yes? No?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. All right. And again, this applies whether we're doing like the 12-week year, which is what I really recommend doing, or doing it like on an annual basis, looking at it on a quarterly basis. Okay. Oh, here's the thing with the 12-week year. It could be, if you're looking at it quarterly, set aside a weekend or a week to reward yourself for a job well done. Okay. Know what that looks like. What does success look like over the next quarter? Or what did success look like this quarter? How did I do? Did I score more than like an 80% to my goal? Then like go do something fun. It might be that I promised myself that if I hit my goal this quarter, I could get a new outfit. Or like I said, if I hit my goal and paid off all my debt, I get to go on a weekend vacation. Right? So whatever that is, set time to make sure that you have that in place. Like, okay, well, what happens if I hit less than 50% of my goal this next quarter? What happens then at the end of my review? What happens if I get to 75%? What happens if I get to 80%? What happens if I get to 100%? You might have different goals in place or different rewards for different achievement so that you know what you're working towards. And the same thing is we're doing this review. If you did well and you had that set up for the last quarter, reward yourself for a job well done. Okay, go out and have dinner. Even if you just take time, let's say that you're like, man, I really failed the last quarter. Quarter number one is like I did bad, like 0%. Number one, I didn't even have a plan. So how would I execute the plan? So it was like 0%. That's okay. Take time to do this review. Take time to set up your next quarter or the next 12 weeks. Go out and have a nice dinner, or go to the beach, or go do something fun to reward yourself for taking the time to implement this moving forward. Okay. Uh, let's see here. I think. Yeah. All right. Fabulous. That's the end of the slideshow. We will do a more in-depth training at the beginning of April for the tracking spreadsheet. Maybe we'll spend some time, like kind of each lesson focused on a different tabby. I'll show you how to start it, how to set up your economic model, how to do your dream life form. We'll talk about values again, which move you closer to your vision or your goals, like your long-term and short-term goals. So we can walk through how to set that all up at the beginning of April. Does anybody have any questions, want clarification? Any ahas from today's lesson on taking time to review where you're at and plan to move forward?
Thank
All
you.
right. Oh, you're welcome. Absolutely. You're welcome, Deborah. I appreciate everyone hopping on today. Our training coming up. Let's see what our next training is. We're going to stop share.
Amy, so I've been like, one of my goals has been to make phone, like call everyone on my CRM.
Uh-huh.
Is there, so is the D2, what's it called? DTD2, is that the best thing to track your or follow, is following that, is that, do you feel like, is that the best way to do it, or like what, do you have another suggestion on how to keep track of the people that you're calling?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's one like best way versus not. So, Adriana's asking about the DTD2, which is do the database to. That's what that acronym stands for. Do the database to, DTD2. And what that does is it breaks it down. If you Google DTD2, what it does is it groups the people in your database by last name by alphabetical letter. And it's not like A, B, C, D, so that you gives people to call over the next 13 weeks. What it does is it groups them by um I can't think of what it's called, by ratio of the number of last names. Uh my brain's going dead. But anyways, so what it does is it groups like letters A and W together. I remember that one because they say that if it's A and W week that you have celebrate with like A and W root beer or something, right? So they group A and W together because if we take statistically, there's the word I was looking for. Statistically, if we take the number of people that have last names that end in A and those that end in W and we pair them together, it's the same as the number of people that have B and E and pair those together, right? And so if you Google do the database to it, groups people that way and it sets it up for like 13 weeks of phone calls so that you know who to contact each week and then we repeat it at the end. Okay, so it's a really good way if you're not making phone calls. It is a great way to dive into your database to start making phone calls and make sure you get through everybody before the end of the quarter. Okay, that's how it was designed. It works really well for that. So yes, Adriana, that's a great plan. You could also just take the number of people in your database, divide it by the number of weeks that you're going to make phone calls, right? Maybe it's 12 weeks, maybe it's 10 weeks that you're going to make phone calls. And then that will give you how many people you need to contact on a weekly basis. Then you could divide it further into days if you wanted to divide that number into 12 or into 5 for the number of days. So you could do it that way as well. So there's some different ways to break that up. There's no wrong or right answer. It's whatever plan you're going to be consistent in executing. So if your goal is to call everybody in your database this next quarter, which is a fabulous goal for everybody, just for the record, that's a great goal. I would absolutely recommend to everybody, if you're not doing that, that you are doing that, whether you follow the DTD2 plan or whether you're like, I'm just going to start at the top and I'm going to call, I've got 357 people in my database and I'm going to make calls for 12 weeks this next quarter. That's 30 people a week. I'm just going to make sure I know who those top 30 people are. That's who I'm going to call week 1. So you could do it either way.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I do recommend, in addition to that, I do really like the 3-attempt approach where you attempt everybody. So if I'm supposed to call 30 people this week, or I'm supposed to contact everybody that ends in A and W this week, I'm going to try them all on like Monday or Tuesday. I'm going to call through the whole string. I'm probably only, if there's like 30 people, let's say either way, it amounts to about 30 people. I'm probably only going to get like 4 or 5 that answer. Okay. The people that don't answer, I'm going to leave them a phone call of, hey, Adriana, this is Amy. I was just calling to touch base. I'll try you later this week, right? I'm priming them later to watch for my phone call. The next time I call them on another day, so it may be like I'm making phone calls on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I could be making phone calls on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It could be Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. It really doesn't matter. I'm just going to set aside 3 days to make those phone calls. Day number 2 that I go to make those phone calls, I'm going to call through everybody who didn't answer on day 1. It's going to lead to more conversations than just trying them once that week, I promise. So we're going to get more people that answer on that second day. Maybe we get another like 5 people that answer on that second day. The people that don't answer, I'm going to shoot them over a text message. Hey, Shauna, it's Amy. I was just calling to touch base. I'll try you again later this week, right? My goal isn't to start a text conversation, just like my goal with the voicemail isn't to get them to call me back because I don't want them to call me back when I'm in the middle of a client appointment. I just want to let them know that I'm going to try them again. Watch for my phone call. I'm coming for you, right? Then day number 3, I go to call them again. Now I've only got like 15 out of the 30 people left because I've got people that have answered already. I'm going to call through them again. If they don't answer, I'm going to leave them a voicemail as well as send them a text message. I find that my answer rate doing the 3-attempt approach goes up to like 80% more. So I'm having 80% conversations with that call list versus Like it's probably closer to like 20% with just making one attempt all the way through that list. So the last time that I call them, I'm going to leave them a voicemail message. I'm also going to send them a similar text message, something like, hey, it was Amy. I was just calling to touch base with you. I'm sorry I missed you this week. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. It could be if you ever need anything real estate related, don't hesitate to reach out, right? Um, Whatever that might be. Again, I'm not necessarily giving them a call to action to call me back. I'm just letting them know and reminding them that I'm in real estate. I send them a voicemail as well as a text message. And then the next week, the slate is wiped clean. I'm done with A and W. I'm moving on to B and E or whatever it is that's paired up next, or I'm moving on to the next 30 contacts in my database. I find that really successful to have more conversations, which leads to obviously more conversations. It's going to lead to a higher number of results. But if that feels overwhelming to you, just start with making a phone call once. Okay, start doing that. And then maybe next quarter, you can bump it to that 3-attempt approach.
And the goal is to connect with everyone once a quarter, right? Is that the goal?
The goal is to connect with everybody on the phone once a quarter. That's part of that 36 to convert, which is we're converting them now from connections to actual clients or getting a referral from them. So yeah, our goal is to have a phone conversation with everybody once a quarter.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Our training for Thursday was supposed to be starting Q2 strong, planning for Q2. We've kind of talked about that all today. So what I'm going to do on Thursday is we're going to cover the spreadsheet. So we're going to dive into the tracking spreadsheet because that will dive into setting up the Dream Life form, the economic model. We'll talk about those tabs on Thursday. So join us for that. We'll deep dive into the spreadsheet showing you how to set yourself up for success. Sound good? Fabulous. I will see you all on Thursday. Any other questions? We've got a little bit more time. So if you have more questions, now's the time. If you're like, Amy, what were you talking about with the 19 to connect and the 36 to convert? Go Google it on my YouTube channel. It's there. I promise you. I touch base on it all the time. So those plans are in there when we talk about like database. So search database connections. It'll be in there. It breaks it down by what is included in those interactions, how to do it. If you're like, Amy, you went over that 3-attempt approach so quick, I have no idea. Go Google it on the YouTube channel. I think it's probably on the training spreadsheet as well, but you can find it. I've covered it a couple different times of how to go into that 3-attempt approach. If you can't find it, shoot me over a text message. I will find it for you and kick it over to you so that you have that training and you can watch it and get all the details on that. Fabulous. I hope you guys all have a great day and a great week. I will see you on Thursday on the same link at 9 a.m. and we'll cover the activities tracker template, Dream Life form economic model, talking about how to set yourself up for success. Know what your goals are. You're welcome. All right. Have a fabulous day, everyone.